Hi there, hello, my name's Lance, it's great to see you. Now, today we're going to be doing another one of the 1-to-1 speed draw-alongs. Today's subject is going to be this here slime girl. So this is one of the more requested ones I've had, apart from Mega Man of course. Now this one's a bit of a tricky one to tackle because of the material of it, but we're going to go through it, 1-to-1 speed, no sped up footage, and I'll talk you through the entire process as we go, and you'll have everything on my screen visible the entire time. What I'm doing with layers, what I'm doing with brushes, everything. Now, at the end of that, if you'd like to share what you've produced, I'd love to see it in the Discord. So with any of my videos, there's usually a homework sheet, and you can post your homework in the homework section on the Discord. If you decide to share it, I'd love to see it in there. Now, if you like what you see, and you'd like to see more like it, or help it happen more often, hit a like, subscribe. You can join the Patreon as well. If you have any comments or any questions about anything you've seen in the video, how anything was done, or what you'd like to see for future videos, I'd love to hear that. I do check all the comments, so pop that in there. I'm in there every couple of days. Now this image you're seeing here is also been produced on the XP Pen 16 Gen 2. It's a lovely tablet, and I've got a review for that one, which will probably be live in the next couple of days, if it's not already, and so I'll link that in the description as well, if you're interested in the hardware used for this. But without any further ado, let's get cracking. Alright, so let's begin. Now, I've got a big intimidating blank canvas here, so let's start by just roughing out some simple shapes. We'll start with a nice sort of ball for the head. And you'll notice I'm using a really big thick brush, and I'm staying zoomed out. One of the big things with staying zoomed out means you don't get sort of stuck in detail. So I'm not going to do anything detail related, just big, base, simple forms. I've got the ball for the head. I'm doing a line down the center of the face. And now I'm going to figure out where I want the curve of the figure to be. I'm going to roughly place the eyes and the chest on the third line, since they'll be sort of, focal points. And so I'm just sort of curving the body there, making sure it's got a bit of dynamism. I'm placing a blob there for the pelvis. Nice ball for the shoulder there. Remembering, of course, that the shoulders, the balls of the shoulders, sit around to the sides, but also around a little bit towards the back. Like they sit further towards the back than the front. And then a line down for the upper arm, ball for the elbow. Now start on the other shoulder. I'm just being really loose with it. I don't want anything clearly defined. So I'll push an arm out into this blank space here. And just a ball for the elbow, roughly. Ball got a bit too big there. Right, there we go. A smaller one, because the ball for the elbow should be a little smaller than the ball for the shoulder. Now have that sitting up a little bit higher. And then have the hand coming over to the face. The concept I had was like someone sort of putting their hand up, maybe saluting or waving, and a whole bunch of sort of slime dripping down from the hand onto the body. So with the fingers there, I know it looks like 3. I tend to group the 2 middle fingers together, just because it helps break up the rhythm. You don't want your fingers sort of splayed out too evenly. It can give you kind of an unnatural rhythm. And then the thumb pointing towards the viewer, so it's mainly just the mass of the thumb there. And I'm just shaping out the forearm, remembering that the forearm will sort of narrow for the last 2/3 of it, and they'll thicken towards the elbow. And I'm going to do the upper arm here, a little bit of a bulge to it, but not a lot. And since the hand's coming forward, the fold of the forearm's coming up. And you can see there I'm splitting the length of the forearm into thirds, so I can figure out where's a good spot for the bicep, the deltoid to go. Alright, and now I'm just going to rough in the shape of the hair. I'm going to give the hair a fair bit of body. I want to make sure the hair's got some sort of volume to it. Since the hair is going to be a sort of major feature, I want it to be pretty big. I don't want it to be sitting too flat on the figure. I'm just shaping the upper arm on the right there. And I've got that arm shape there, just very vaguely. I'm going to put down some guidelines for where I'd like the eyes to be. Sort of where I want to shape the side of the face there. I get my soft eraser, and I'm not going to erase everything out. I'm not going to Control Z. I'm just going to remove it a little bit and then go back over the top of it. That sort of lets me know where I was, so I can adjust my next step based on what I had before. So if what I had before looked a bit narrow, I can leave it there and still sort of partially see it, and thicken it up so it's thicker than it was before. I'm not sort of starting from scratch each time. Now I'm just throwing down a rough outline of the head, remembering the head will, generally speaking, taper from thick to thin, from top to bottom. Sort of doing the arc for the actual cranium there to figure out where I want the side plane of the head to be. About there. That's where I'll pop the ear and so forth. Now, pop in the neck. And remember that the neck will come out of sort of the back 2/3 of the head, and connecting it then with those muscles that go from the base of the ear to the center between the two collarbones, and the trunk of the neck down, and then about 2/3 of the way down, having it go out to the shoulder. And now I'm going to try and rough out the center line down the body, because the torso is tilted a bit, so I want to make sure I'm mapping the features turned a bit. And so here I'm mapping out the pectorals, where they join the arms. They're going to form part of the boobs later, because you'll notice that the breast becomes pectoral about sort of, depending on the size, about 2/3 of the way up. So the top part of them is actually pectoral, and the bottom part is a fat deposit. And so here I'm doing a guideline for the base of where I want the eyes to be, and I'm also figure out where I want to space the eyes out to be. I always like to dig the eyes in a bit. So now, space the eyes out. They'll usually be about, if you get the eye line and you divide it into 3, you'll have eye, the space between the eyes, and another eye. So the space between the eyes should be about as big as one of the eyes themselves. And now I'm just partially erasing the corner of that jaw there. It's a bit low. I want to pull it up a little bit. And one of the other things you'll notice is the bottom edge of the outer edge of the ear will tend to actually kind of follow the line of the jaw a lot of the time. And so that's an easy way to sort of start positioning the ear, since you know that the top of where the ear attaches is the midpoint of the eyes. That's why the arm on the side of glasses is always perfectly horizontal. And so you know where the top of where the ear attaches, and the bottom edge of the ear will tend to line up with the bottom line of the jawline. Now I'm just popping in the nose here, remembering the nose starts indented in and then comes out. And then a nice sort of simple smile there. I'm probably going to tune this one. I just want to sort of essentially book it in with myself to have the character sort of smiling. Maybe a fang. Fang would be cool. We've got a lower edge to the eye there, looking like roughly the right shape. Cool. Alright. And now, look where that one's going. So I'm going to do a bit more on the neck here. Neck's looking a little bit thick. The mouth, I might reposition that one. And I might do it with redrawing instead of just, lassoing it. Maybe I'll move it a bit so closer there to the front. Maybe it's not as indented in, I'm not sure. Either way, move on and do a bit more on the breasts now. So, now the construction method I use for the breasts is in my upper body video. I'll put a little thing up on screen there for that one. But essentially it's the upside down heart shape that starts at the center between the collarbones. And I use that to sort of guide that top edge of the breast. And then I'll do the V shape from the edge of the collarbone in, and that helps me mark out where that mass sort of dies off, and then those two diagonal lines that you can see coming from halfway along the collarbone out and down diagonally, those help me map out where the pectoral will end, since it goes from breast tissue to pectoral in a sort of like a boot shape. And so that really helps me sort of scaffold those shapes towards the side there, because they can be kind of tricky. But again, I've got a video of that. The link would have come up a minute ago, so if you want to have a bit of an in-depth look at that, that's fine. But essentially it's an upside down heart shape with a V in the middle, and then two diagonal lines coming out diagonally from halfway along the collarbones. The collarbones are absolutely fantastic. I don't just think they look appealing. They're a critical component of constructing the upper body and neck. So if you're drawing them in after the fact, you are missing out. They're fantastic. So now I'm just going to go some base sort of placeholders for the eyes. And I think that's shaping some of the boob there, and I want more of the sort of ribs or rib cage edge to show there. I want more of a contrast to the line where the breast touches the top of the rib cage there. So I'm just going to pull that out and down, and then have the flesh between the rib cage and the pelvis go a bit sort of rubbery and concave, and then come back out around that hip bone and on the other side as well. And of course, if you're interested in, how to construct the hips, there's not much hips in this sort of picture, but if it is something you want to work on, I do have a video on that. I'll link that here as well. All right. Now I'm just starting on some more of the hair. And getting some of those base shapes in. That looks nice. Right. Now, partially erasing out some of the face, just so I can tune that in a little bit. Not because I'm sort of starting on the detail now, but because I'm going to start sort of getting some ideas of how I want the slimy sort of drippiness to go. I haven't done this kind of character many times before, but I've decided to have another swing at this one because it was requested in the straw poll, so what Rome demands. And so I'll have a go at this one. I thought I'd sort of apply a different method to it. I'll get that into that in a second. The old image I did, I got kind of lost in all the sort of reflective surfaces and different kinds of shading, and I think I've got a better way of approaching it now, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now I'm just sort of doing the hair as though it's hair, but just sort of keeping a sort of soft shape language to it. With hair, it does sort of really drape and spill like water when you're drawing just regular hair, so this is actually not too far. Like slime hair is basically how you draw regular hair, it just doesn't have any points on it. And so I'm just drawing a bit more in here for some nice sort of smooth shapes. Just gently teasing those lines out. I'm not really concerned with these being very neat at all. This is the sketch. The sketch is going to be just straight up turned off before the fills even land, so I don't really have to worry about anything here. I could draw a hot dog if I wanted and it won't show up. And so here I'm just drawing in red to show that it's different from the blue, and let me know that this is the next stage I'm working on. So I'm now adding where I want some drips to come off. I'm trying to not repeat any rhythms, not repeat any shapes if I can avoid it. I do want them to be sort of fairly consistent, but I don't want them to be like too regular and repetitive, like they're like fence posts, like they're just one after another after another. And I also don't want to put them everywhere. If you put them everywhere, the image just gets busy and it sort of loses that. I'm doing the hair there, and I want the hair to sort of sit and drape and show the shape of the top part of the breast there. And so as it goes around, I've got a sort of arcing up pattern, which I'm not in love with, but I'll come back to that one later. And now here's what I want to do. This is the thumb and hand sort of pouring down the sort of syrupy consistency stuff. Reason being, I went to I was at Costco the other day and had these giant 1.5-liter bottles of like vanilla syrup for making coffees with, and it's just the most appealing color. It's this beautiful sort of amber, red, gold sort of color. It's just beautiful. And the first time I poured one out into a cup was absolutely joy to watch the way it sort of had that color range of golds to reds to sort of almost pale mustard amber. It's just beautiful. And so now I'm having the blue blobs coming down and trying to sort of follow the contour of the body there. Alright, doing a bit more on the hair on the right hand side, sort of neating that up, and getting an idea for the flow as the hair, or blob or whatever it is, sort of comes down and starts to fall along the front of the character. And now doing a bit of the line under the breast there, and partially erasing out some of the construction shapes underneath, just so that they're not sort of disturbing the shape that I'm seeing here. I'm wanting to tune that in. If you have a lot of your construction shapes visible, it can sort of disturb your view of the overall silhouette. So I'm just cleaning some of that out and tuning in some of the lines there. And then maybe narrowing a bit of the elbow on the bottom right there, just to tune that in. And just defining some of the blobs coming down off the boob on the right a bit. A bit more on the hand. I want to have a good definition of the folds of the palm. Since the fingers are bent down and the thumb's pushing in, those pads of the palm, so the one that sits under the ridge of the fingers, the one that sits at the base of the thumb, and the one that sits on the outside edge of the palm, they're going to be sort of squished in a bit and they'll really show up. This. Start tuning in some of the face. The face really does need to be dialed in on something like this. And I also want to have like the hair sort of forming a little blob string, like a blob bridge. There's probably a word for that. There, and that sort of like hair in front of your face, but if your hair was like was goo. And trying to make sure I don't just do a very sort of straight line for it, like have it bulge and blob and drip to make sure really it sort of communicates that material. Thinking of doing a bit more on this area here with the hand, and that's a nice long drip coming down. Sort of pouring out goo like syrup or like honey or whatever, and having it make a sort of ripple shape, essentially like pouring syrup on ice cream. I want that sort of straight shape as it falls down, but then as it impacts the thing it's landing on, you'll notice the shapes sort of start to ripple and compress before eventually then returning to a sort of draping, sort of, you know, dribbling down kind of shapes. So I want that sort of long straight, then compressed, then moving on to a long straight as well. Just defining some more of the droplets around there. Maybe a bit of a pinch to the under the ribs. Maybe under the arm as well. I'm just throwing the eraser over the whole thing. Time to move on to the refined sketch. So again, I'm going to keep what I had before and just work over the top of it. That way, I'm always sort of scaffolding myself with what I've already done. I don't have to sort of start fresh. And so now you can see for the first time, I'm zooming in because it's time to actually start doing some detail. But I won't zoom in until I've got all the base forms in. If the image doesn't work zoomed out, it's not going to work zoomed in. So now I'm just going to sort of start detailing out some of these with a bit of a smaller brush, just to really be more defined with it. I'll start with the face and sort of detail there and work down. So I'm going to shape that blob there, or that sort of goo string. I'm sure there's a word for that. Like a tendril? Was that a tentacle? I don't know. One of the two. Now a bit more there as one bit of hair goo goes under another bit of hair goo. I don't know if this would happen with goo, but I mean, there seems to be sort of variable consistency with these. Like some parts of them are, solid enough to grab, and some parts are just sort of like water, where you just sort of have bits passing through. So, what the rules are for these, I have no idea. But I imagine realism and accuracy wasn't the primary focus for this kind of Mon Musume, that's the one. Alright, so detailing down the side of the head there, and that sort of cheekbone. The jawline for me is a big bit that I like to get like spot on. So I'm gonna make sure I get that right, and also some of the details of the placement of the eyes as well. Since it's such a focal point, there isn't really much room for error there, so it's always worth making sure you've really dialed in the eyes, nose, mouth, and jawline, because it's really a sort of make or break for your image. If those features aren't on target, then you're going to have a rough time. A bit more on the hair there. Maybe a bit more on the side. I don't want to detail the hair too much because then it will look like hair. I want it to sort of allude to the shapes of hair, because this is a thing that is sort of mimicking a person. I had an idea for a short comic I wanted to do. It was a slime girl that sees all these, fancy, big, proper mammals walking around with their skeletons. I think they're so good, and so she gets a skeleton of her own. In fact, she gets several and just sort of carries them around and tries to show them off. Like, see, I'm a big fancy human. I don't just have one skeleton. I've got several. I've got a grown-up one. I've got a child's one. I think that'd be really cute. Because they come from a dungeon. There's a bunch of skeletons going around. But yeah, I don't really have much of an idea for it, other than just the idea of them showing off that they've got a bunch of skeletons and they're just as good as you big walkie-talkie people. I did like the idea of forming the body with wrapping slime-like muscle fibers around the skeleton and having it sort of become, aware of how much benefit there is to having a skeleton of your very own. Just getting the eyes there. I'm do something with the eyelashes, maybe have them little blobs on the end. That'd be cute. And the eyebrows visible through the hair, which is a thing I always do, and now for once it makes sense because the whole thing is going to be transparent. Now on that, I don't actually plan to have the whole thing be evenly transparent. You'll notice this with a lot of sort of slime characters. They'll cheat, and I'm going to as well, and they'll have some parts of the figure be quite opaque, like the face especially, as well as parts of the chest and torso will be fairly opaque. But then other parts will be quite transparent, just so they've got that ability to characterize one part in one way and another part in another way. That's what I'm going to go for as well with this. Whether it succeeds, see what we get. So now I'm just going to get a bit more of a clear definition of the flow of the hair there. I'm not going to keep these lines. I'm just wanting to use them to make sure I've got that shape and rounded flow. I have an issue, and I've seen it with a few other people as well, that when I'm drawing hair, even on a character with a head turned like this, I'll draw the hair kind of front on, which kind of flattens the image overall. So that's a good way of sort of just putting some markers down for myself to make sure I'm bulging it out enough to show that it's not just a rounded thing, it's a rounded thing on top of the rounded thing of the head. And that can really help. And you'll notice also I'm drawing a little vertical line through the blobs of slime there. That helps you make sure that the overall direction of them is fed by gravity. And that one there, I drew it sort of too close under the other one, so it had a sort of unnatural mechanical look to it, so I just moved it over the side there. And again, I've drawn that vertical line through it to make sure that it hangs down with gravity. Those vertical lines won't be there in the inking, they're just there for me. And then drawing a bit of the hair that's sort of coming down behind there, and maybe another bloob off the face. And again, that vertical line to help me make sure that the blob is moving the right way. It'll also work if you were doing a character in motion. So for instance, if you have a character who's, slimy or, sweaty or otherwise covered in goo or whatever, you can use the lines of motion to define where that goo should go. And I'm just doing in the teeth and some detail in the eyes. Whether a slime character should have teeth, I don't know, or care. Or whites for the eyes. And now I'm going to work on the thumb. And I want that sort of coming pretty much directly towards the viewer. Which can be a bit of a tricky sort of angle to draw the thumb on. If you are interested in drawing hands, I do have a video on how to draw hands. So I'll link that one there as well, because that could be handy. Top part of the hand there. Looking about right. I'm going to come back over to the side of the face here because I'm a little bit... I'm not in love with that. I want to tune that a little bit. Anyway, alright, back to the fingers. So one of the other things to remember when doing nice simplified fingers is, as long as you get the lengths roughly right, and your middle finger will be as long as your palm, and your pointer and ring fingers will be just slightly shorter than that, and your pinky finger will be 2/3 the length of your middle finger, and that makes them pretty easy to sort of space out. And then just remember to also have the fingers taper from thick to thin. Overall, the whole body tapers from thick to thin, so things like your arms will be thickest at the shoulder, thinnest at the wrist, and overall they'll sort of taper as sort of long carrot shapes. Same with the legs and everything else, as it sort of moves away from the torso, with the head being the only exception, with it being narrower at the bottom, close to the torso, and wider at the top. So now I'm just sort of getting a bit of detail on that goo, that goo pouring waterfall-y bit, and maybe even adding a blob to the bottom of one of those, again, I don't know what you call them, like a goo string, a goo trail. No, those sound like something you wouldn't want. They sound like something you wouldn't want to Google, so I'll leave that investigation for later. And if you feel like investigating what the term is, I'll advise you to also not Google that while you're at work. The blob there off the elbow, and maybe a little loose blob that's come off. I do sort of wonder how that works, like, do they produce more of their own mass over time, or do they just like have the ability to recoup all of their missing mass? I'm probably putting too much thought into that. And like, if they eat like 10 kilos of, whatever wandered into the dungeon, are they now like larger by that amount, or do they just keep the nutrients? And again, I'm thinking probably too hard about this. Although I did that lovely sort of Z Frank video about the slime molds. That was really interesting. Alright, now I'm just getting the line around the breast on the right there, starting on the downward point for those hanging blobs. A bit of the hair and having that come down as well. And this one, it feels kind of like, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like it matches the one on the right. Sorry, on the one on the left. So I'm going to reshape that one, I think. And have it sort of pool and bunch up a lot more like the one on the left does. To sort of try and match that shape language so it's not sort of seeming out of place, like where one is a big smooth shape and the other one is a sort of disturbed, complicated shape. But I also don't want to do like the same thing, so I think what to do there. So I'll work on the shoulder for a minute while I think of that. Just have that come down and around, and then shaping that inside edge of the breast there. And having it come down, trying to keep that overall rounded shape. and making sure I get that sort of that blob there disturbing the outline. It's really important to, wherever you can, disturb the outline of your character illustration. If they end up with just a silhouette that looks like, you know, a chick or a dude, just dude McGuy bro and chick McLady gal, you won't really have a very interesting design. It's one of the things, well, it used to be true, with Overwatch, is they'd have, since it was a video game and everyone had these various different skins, they'd have to have these really distinct silhouettes that would be consistent across multiple skins, so you could tell the character at a glance whether they, you know, a bright green, bright blue, a pharaoh, a wizard, a witch, a bureau drawer, whatever it is. Their shape would maintain a really strict and strong identity. So it's really important with something like this, since it is just basically the female form, that I've got some things to disturb that silhouette and make it distinctly not just the female form. Now, it is primarily going to be that, but I still want to have there be more to it. So now I'm doing that centerline division there, and the bottom edge of the breast on the left. And thinking where that crease would be for where the pectoral meets the deltoid there. And then shaping out the arm. The forearm has a bit of a sort of bend to it. All your bones actually have a bit of bend to it. If your bones were completely straight, you know, instead of flexing when you land like a coiled spring, they would probably just explode. So the bones are all slightly bent. So no section of the body is completely straight, which is true even more for the extremities than it is for the center of the body. So things like the forearm and the shins, they've got a more natural bend to the bone there. So once you get the straight shapes, it's important to add a bit of that curvature to it. Now I'm just sort of detailing in the arm out on the right there. Well, it's on the left side of the picture now, but it is on the right of the image overall. And then just sort of deciding where I want to put that line for the hair, because I don't want it to be sort of visible and separate, but at the same time I do want it to sort of occupy and sort of frame the character. Now I'm trying to just sort of narrow that arm out a bit. I'm not super sure if I love it, but I don't want to have the figure be too complicated, because again, this has to fit into the time I have available. This is probably going to be the longest one of these. I'm going to try and get these a bit shorter. 2 hours is probably a big ask for a lot of people, although a lot of people did say that the hour-long video took them a lot more than an hour, so we'll see what we get. If you want these to be longer or shorter, let me know in the comments. This one's going to be 2 hours, the last one was an hour and a half, the one before that was an hour. I feel like things are escalating, but anyway. This one here. This one probably took me a bit longer, so I haven't drawn a slime person in quite a while. So this one took a minute, and I probably should have done like a practice run. The old, like the old Bob Ross videos where he'd... fun fact, he'd paint each of the paintings on them 3 times. He'd do once to get an idea for the painting, once for the dress rehearsal, and then he'd paint the whole thing again a 3rd time for the final recording, which means every one of his paintings is in triplicate. And I think all the episodes are here on YouTube, so if you want something to watch, I mean, I obviously watch my channel, but also, you know, do watch Bob Ross. Bro really has the, he's really got the right vibe. Alright. That's looking roughly alright. Now here I've taken a bit of a sort of 10-minute break and sort of come back. And one of the reasons why that can be kind of important is it gives you a good idea on what things that you want to really fix up. So fresh eyes are something you can give yourself, so stop, grab a drink of water, maybe go for a walk, maybe knock off for the day, maybe, you know, maybe turn a screen off and go outdoors and do something fun, like, I don't know what kids do outdoors these days. So here I'm just getting the hair down there. Alright, I'm just going to disturb that shape and redo the end there because I don't love what it's doing. So I might break it up, not the same way as the other one's broken up, but I do want to break it up so that it's not a sort of simple shape, like the one on the left is too much of a simple shape. I don't want to fight it for attention because I want it to be a bit of a focal point, but at the same time, I don't want to sort of have one side, you know, be kind of interesting and the other side just be kind of there. And so what I'm going to do is have like some separate sort of drops and blobs there. That's looking okay. Now I'm just going to merge my two sort of sketch layers together here. That way I can start erasing everything at once. Now I'm going to start working on some of the details as well, like the eyelashes, just stuff I've missed. And I want to make sure it's sort of there and clearly defined for when I get to my inking stage, which will be in a couple of minutes. And then flipping it horizontal to make sure everything looks right. One thing, and I don't do this as much for my recordings, but, you know, for those of you playing along at home, flip your canvas all the time. Set a shortcut key on your keyboard for flip canvas. And just smack that thing like it owes you money. Like, just really hit it often, and it's a good chance to sort of reset your vision on what you're drawing. And a lot of the mistakes will just sort of immediately jump out. So it's really valuable to do that and sort of freshen up your eyes. But again, the best way to do that is to just take a break. So now I'm doing a sort of separate blob mark on the right hand side there. How there's like a separate layer of one thing over the other, I don't know. Maybe it's like when you put water over water and sometimes you get like a droplet of water floating on water for a while, that kind of thing. And then putting a little bit on the finger there, just to really sort of split that up. Alright. 1, 2, 3. And now what I'm going to do is start grabbing some of the parts and just sort of free transforming them a bit to sort of place them where I want them to be. Some of them look a bit squirrely, and so I've taken a bit of a, like I said before, I took a bit of a break from the drawing, and so I'm just coming at it with fresh eyes now and seeing what things I want to adjust and where I want to put them. I decided to pull the eyes sort of down and in a bit more just to make it a bit sort of, you know, cuter. Let's see if we can get that angle. It feels right. Right. Now with that, having a look here, so this is the arm on the left there. I'm feeling like the elbow isn't coming out sort of quite far enough. Like the arm should be maybe a bit bigger, I feel, because it should be long enough that the shoulder to the elbow to the wrist should come to the bottom of the pelvis. And I feel like it was just a bit short to do that. So I'm going to extend that out a little bit and maybe thicken it to sort of match the shoulder there. The hand selected. Ruffle that in a little bit. Really push that bend to the wrist there. Be skewed a little bit just to get that angle looking a bit nicer. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Alright, the other thing I want to do is I want to adjust some of these parts as well. So things like the boob on the left there doesn't quite match the sort of the shape and volume as the one on the right. So I'm going to move it out and up a bit and then pull the bottom down. A bit better. I'm going to have to redo the line of it on the bottom there, but that's okay. I can do that. So again, I'll partially erase it so I can remember where I've been. And I'll do it down there. And I'll smooth that line out because it went a bit angular there with the skewing. Because when you skew something with the free transform tool, you'll tend to lose a lot of your smooth, even curves because it'll distort the the section in a sort of very sort of straight way. Here, I'm just grabbing that whole arm on the right there. I'm just going to move that out a bit. Maybe up. A bit better. And this then gives me some space there to expand out the ridge of the breast on the right. So again, I'm not going to remove it completely, but I am going to take some of it away so I can see where I've been and just really sort of expand that out there so the arm, so that the breast comes out to the side of the arm. So then partially erase it and then come back in and just sort of smooth that out, because now that I've expanded the side out, there's a sort of flat edge along the bottom, which I don't like. So I'm just going to come back in and do a really nice, big, sweeping, smooth line there. And then to sort of support the new, much larger, much wider front porch, I'm going to widen the torso a bit there, so that it sort of, at least, you know, partially makes sense with the size of everything else. I mean, it's a see-through person made of slime. I can I can ignore any kind of rules that I want at this stage. The sketch is looking pretty tight. I'm just going to neaten up some parts of it. I don't have to neaten up everything. Like, I can make, as long as I've got enough there to be getting on with in the inking, I probably don't need to fix up everything. I just want to fix up that last little bit there. I want a little bit of a corner to the edge of the rib cage poking out from under the breast there. So that means adjusting kind of the direction of where the rib cage would be. I feel like that kind of works. I just like that sort of, that crease in under there. That, I like the way that sort of affects the shape. And then maybe making the elbow, like the bone of the elbow, a little bit more pronounced and a bit more prominent. That's looking quite nice. And then making sure I have enough information on the hair there to be getting on with, just so I'm not sort of having to make a guess unsupported when I get to the inking. Maybe adjusting the mouth a little bit. Just placing just the tiniest bit of like tuning to make sure it sort of fits right. I'm just gonna pull that corner up a little bit. There we go. Down and in. Not too far. That's about right. Maybe a little smaller. Yeah, some good. Tiny bit of rotation. Just to keep that top line of the mouth there roughly in line with the eye line. Right, let's get on the inks. So, as you've probably seen with the way I do inking, I'll get my brush that I just used for sketching, and I'll have a version of that that has smoothing on it, and I'll just go over and do all the inking with the brush that's the same width all over. Then after that, I'm going to make a second pass with another layer, and I'll add little bits of thickness to all the bits that would be ambiently occluded. Make sure I'm actually on the right layer there. Got my sketch layer with the opacity lowered. I'm now working on a layer above it. On my inks layer with just a hard round brush with a bunch of smoothing on there, because I have hands that are roughly as steady and stable as a pit bull and a spin dryer, so you know the tool's assistance is enormously valuable. nice sort of curves there for like that. If you're having trouble getting the line right with things like a little blob coming off it there, you can just draw the regular line and then erase a hole in it and draw the blob after. Sometimes it can be worth drawing the line and erasing it to keep that flow really nice and consistent. You know, elbow there, and nice big smooth lines. Mistaken line there, I was trying to sort of move the canvas. Blob there, and just having those creasing edges there. I don't want to do too many bits of sort of internal line work, just because I want to have the figure be described by shine and by shade more than anything else. So I do want to have some line art to define the object separations. But overall, I want to make sure that it's got a decent amount of shape through shade and value. So I'm going to do a big smooth line over the dome of the head. Looking good. Upper arm, lower arm there, that blob sort of hanging off and sort of forming a little droplet. I saw a nature doco about things that grow in a cave that sort of look like those sort of slimy bloobs. That's what I was talking about with, since the line of the breast on the left there is, it's kind of a critical design element. I want to make sure that line is really stable, and rather than doing it and stopping and starting and doing it again, I'll have a lot better luck doing the flow with one line, cutting a section out, then placing the sort of the dribble or blob on it, that broken line. Here, I've got that shape for all the stuff on the hair coming together there. I might just get back up because I started towards the top and I've moved down, but I haven't done the head and face. So I might get back up there and do that now. And I'll do very nice sort of simple shaped eyes on this one. I don't want to do too many sort of details on it. I want the overall thing to look fairly simple because it's going to be challenging enough getting the material right. So I don't want to set myself too much of a challenge. I've got a time limit on this one after all of an hour and a half that I completely blew past by half an hour. Well, I reckon I could probably get it done a lot quicker now, but you know what they say, if wishes were horses, we'd all be eating steak. Right, taking that blob down there. I think that's the phrase. Another blob there on that little sort of stringly bit across the face. The eye visible through the hole in it. Well, the whole body's transparent, so maybe it wouldn't matter. Maybe a thing, actually. Maybe do one of those characters with the hair over their eyes. Maybe do one of those characters with like the hair over their eyes, and since it's slime, you can just see their eyes and they can just see you, which I think would be cute. Well, maybe they don't see with their eyes. I mean, there's no real sort of, cornea or lens or anything else there. Maybe they don't see. Maybe they simulate eyes, or I don't know. Maybe that show about a slime would have that information for me. I watched an episode of it, but it's on like season 4 or 5 now. Yeah. Right. Here's where I think the whites of the eyes will go eventually, if I decide to add them. I'm getting those irises right. And then where to put pupils. Roughly. So. Good. Line up the mouth in there. Then the teeth. I like to have a sort of bowing front, a bow for the front teeth, and then a fang, because it's a monster. Monsters should have fangs. And I'll come back and do the thick line art later, but for now I just want to put a bit of black there because it'll be nice to look at. And here is again what I was talking about doing the line and getting that flow right, and then coming back in after and erasing holes in it to do the detail. Cut the holes out. I'll get that in because getting the line of the jawline right is, at least to my view, just absolutely critical. It's one of the few bits where I will have a few goes just to make sure it really nails that detail. Finishing up the hair, making sure I haven't gone too far down and left all the top parts of the image unfinished. The eyelash there because I realised the other one's got a final little blue on the end there. Good. And then bring that line in around and down and around and then all the way back up. Way up. I was thinking of having a little sort of tendrily hangy bit there, but it'd be too thin. I don't have any other sort of bits of slime that are running that thin, so I'm just going to skip it and have it be a blob. One thing that can help with a character like this is having a sort of a minimum blob size. So if you think about like water as having a surface tension, you can't really get a droplet of water outside a certain sort of size range based on surface tension. So I want to do a similar thing with this sort of person's fluidic body, is have a sort of minimum curve. Line there for the boob. Having a couple of goes at that one, so I'll do the line, starting the outside, a nice smooth line all the way around. That looks nice. And then cutting out from that shape to do the blob hanging out the bottom. And then doing this separate little blob here. And trying to add a little bit more interest to it as well as I do it. Line down there to the waist, and then out and down to the hips. Same thing on the other side, really trying to enhance that corner of where the rib cage would be. Not that this person has a rib cage, or at least not one that they sort of hang on to. They may own several of them. Maybe they have a collection. Some people collect forks. Some people collect commemorative rib cages. You never know. And then one more sort of surface blob there on the arm, just to make sure it's sort of included. A lot of it done there. What I'm going to do now that I've got the base shapes in, because I'm fairly happy with that, is I'm going to make myself sort of like a key. So like a map has a key, I'm going to make myself a key shape to use for doing all of the shines. If you imagine like a statue that's covered in like a mirrored surface, one of the things that'll happen is that if you look around like a complicated object with like a mirrored surface, you'll notice a lot of things repeat. Like if you have a thing of grapes, let's say, that you have a mirror finish, all the grapes that are mirror shined will have the same sort of rounded image projected on them. So once I've done the inking here, I'm going to make one of those sort of key shapes for myself. Now I'm just doing a bit of just those dark edges between the fingers there. Just a bit of sort of ambient occlusion. So essentially where the ambient light would have trouble reaching. Anywhere that's got a bit of a pinch or a fold or an object over another object, that's where I like to thicken my line art. You can also thicken your line art based on like how far the objects are from each other. So a nice big thick round bit of line art around the edge of the image can work nicely. You can use it to separate overlapping parts. Like you could have like the hand in front of the face and have the outside edge of the hand have a much thicker bit of line art. That's one thing you can do. For this one, I'm just going over and adding a little bit of thickness to those sections there. A bit more under the hair as well. And then the crease, like the arm here, that's another sort of prime one. A bit more around here. I'm just filling in those eyelashes there. I'll tend to leave them blank just because they're a big blob of black, and this is the stage where I come in and do blobs of black, so I've just sort of rolled them into this part of the workload. A bit more coming around the eye there. And since this is on a separate layer, because you can see I've got my regular line art turned bright red, and now I'm using this extra layer here to add the thickest bits, or the thicker bits. Not only does that help me see where I have and haven't done, it also has the benefit that it's separate, so if I want to, I can just, erase, put, erase, put, erase. And so if I go over the edges a bit, I can just sort of erase a bit out. But these will all be so small, I don't really have to worry about them being very neat at all. If you spend too much time, zoomed in and overly focused, you can sort of lose track of the picture overall. So I tend to try and, quite literally, not sweat the small stuff. And now here I'm just rotating the image because it's easy to draw these curves. Because since I'm right-handed, when I move my wrist, I naturally make a leftward bulging arc. So whenever I have to draw an arc that's a thing that arcs towards the left, I'll rotate the canvas so it more naturally fits the way my hand will flow. I'll just put an extra bit of thickness along that bottom part of the jaw there to really sort of separate it out from the body. Really darken that little corner in there as well. It's looking pretty good. I'll put a little bit of darkness there. And there as well, just to really thicken it up. This is a step you probably don't need to take. I like the effect it gives. It's a very subtle effect, and it's probably a lot of work, so, if there's one step you skip, it could probably be this. I just like the way it sort of makes the line art look. Oop, a bit of zoom in there, a bit awkward. Right, a bit more there, under the boob. Zooming in a bit far out. There's not actually that much detail on this image. A lot of the work's going to be in getting that material right. There's no outfit, no complicated mechanical armor or anything. It's just, the form and some blobs, which is surprising it's taken me this long to make, but here we are. Okay, a bit more. Crease the arm there. And there where there's the arm over the top of the hair. It's looking pretty good. I need to do a little bit more on the bloobs around there. Sort of the piling sort of there. A bit under the arm as well. Again, this step isn't super necessary. If I miss some bits, then, it won't be the end of the world. But it can really help give it a bit of depth, so I do like to do it. And then a little bit more up the hair there, and along there, neck. Here, just for it to have those sort of really concave sort of folds as well. Down a little bit. Good. Largely okay. Now I'm just going to merge both those ink layers together and turn them all black. And so there I've got my combined Lineart layer with the thicker parts added for the ambient occlusion. That's looking pretty good. Now it's time to do the flats. Now in this case, the flats are going to be one color. But what color? Now depending what YouTube thinks. I had trouble posting this on Discord once I finished it up, because Discord decided that the see-through person that was orange was not suitable for all audiences. So I made them bright green. I was like, yep, bright green? That's always suitable for all audiences. So I was maybe a bit concerned about whether I'll need to, I don't know, put a color filter for this entire illustration. Let's see if my skills at DaVinci Resolve will get me there. So orange is probably what I want to do. Again, coming back to that sort of that thing of the vanilla syrup for coffee making, it's just such a lovely, almost sort of hypnotic color. It was so thick and have that sort of beautiful color range. That's one of the things about the slime people characters, is it's not about them being a bright color, it's about the color range. Like if a character is red, they're red and some other colors as well. So here I'm just going to tune that color in. It's a bit too intense. It's looking about right. Maybe a bit paler. Calmer. Orange. Maybe. Yeah, there we go. A sort of honey color would be nice. Whatever color I do, I'm going to have to use the color low, further one way and the other way in the hue slider there. My little test blob there. So this is going to be my map. This is probably the key to how I get the whole rest of the image done. If you're eating chips previously, put the chips down for a sec. It's time to lock in. Or if chips help you lock in, pick the chips up. It's time to lock in. So I've got the blob there selected, so I can't draw sort of outside it. I've made a shading layer, which is a multiply layer with a kind of, you can see there, a desaturated kind of mid-tone purple. And whatever I do here, I have to be consistent with over the rest of the character. So this is essentially my key upon which to base the rest of it. And so I'm thinking I'll have a nice sort of smooth gradient on the top of it. Like that, so I'll just blend that in. So I'll have a dark to light gradient starting at the top. A thick sort of band of dark towards the bottom. Blend that in. And I'll neaten this up as I go. But again, this is just a reference for me. This doesn't actually have to be correct or very neat at all. This is just to help me map out different surfaces of the body based on the shape. So now that I've got that, I've got a new layer here, and I'll start mapping out where I want to put some of the highlights. So I'll have like a shine in the corner there, and maybe like a big specular shine on the front. Because if you imagine this is a reflection of what's in front of her, then this is essentially mapping what her view is, what's the surface going to be mapped along the sort of mirror-like shine. And so I'm going to have the bottom shadow there not come all the way to the bottom. That's a sort of a good start for a sort of gem or sort of jewel shape there. Now the next thing I want to do is make sure that I've got some color variation in what I'm mapping out. I can expand this with the final drawing, but I want to make sure that that's kind of covered off here as well. So I'll get some of a color that's sort of analogous to it, so fairly close, so sort of light orange, And I'll give it a sort of rim light there for it sort of shining about. And maybe a sort of glow from the bottom kind of shape, as well as that sort of hard rim, because that'll give me two gradients I can use to map things out. So I'll block some in, I'll blend it. I'll get rid of some of it. Taking the highlight with it, I'm sorry. Pretty good. I don't like it's coming over the top of that lower shade though, so I'm going to get rid of that. Rightio, so now, just as a demonstration, I've got my map, and I'm going to apply that to the figure. So, if I want to know where the head, or what colour the head is, I'll look at the top of the orb. Where the bottom of the boob is, I'll look at the bottom of the orb. The side of the arm, side of the orb. Other side of the arm, other side of the orb. The front of it, well, we won't do that. So that's how I'll get those shapes mapped out. So here, I filled in the colours. I'm just filling in some of the gaps there in the background. And now it's all one big solid colour. Yeah. Alright. Got my colour there just to fill in any little gaps. So now, time to start on shading. So again, I'll reference from my little orb there. So the top sections of things will be darker. So I'll treat the head just like the orb. So I'm going to have a top area of darkness that will grade down. Now I'm also going to put, you can see there I've added a map, a transparency map to it. What that means is I can't sort of shade outside of where the flats are. So I'm just adding in a bunch of shade there towards the top of the head. And I've realized that as part of adding that map there, I've lost the ability to see my little key. So I'm going to quickly pen that in there. Now I'm mapping more of that head in. Bit of the arm, sorry, under the... There, I'm just going to shade some parts of it out. I know the whole thing is transparent, but I'm still going to add some shaded areas to give it depth, which is sort of a bit of the best of both worlds. So, alright, more shade there. Try and work sort of top to bottom. Now here I'm adding a bit of shading there to sort of allude to the arm behind it. I don't want to do a lot of transparency with this, but I want to have some little bits of it, just to sort of give that impression. And so now I'm doing the detailing, the sort of little saucy bit. This is going to be one of the trickier parts because it's a more complicated shape. Mapping a circular shape to a non-circular shape can be a bit tricky. So I thought I'd start with this one and just sort of generally treat it like a dark bit on top, dark bit underneath, and keep that as a sort of general rule. So good there. And I'll blend some parts out as well, but I just want to get the base bits of tone in first, and then I can neaten them up. So you can see here I'm having to sort of cut bits off the side there as I go, and that's fine. As long as I get the overall shapes right, that's all I need to do. Try to make sure that I work from top to bottom so I don't sort of miss anything. I'm just going to get the rest of the top there. A bit towards the sides. And again, I'll try and leave that sort of a gap between the shading that I'm adding and the top edge there. But again, I can clean it up by just erasing out that edge there. I just want to get the overall ones right. One other thing that makes this a little bit challenging is that normally with a multicolored work, I can use my flats to control my selection. But with this, the flats are all the same color. You could get around that by like coloring different sections in different colors and then just overlaying one layer over the top of it. of one color, and then using that multicolored layer as your selection controller, which might actually be a quick way to do it now that I think about it, but I didn't do that, so it is what it is. Now the other thing I want to do is, since these parts of the body, like the hands, are thinner than parts of the head, I don't want to have them go to as much sort of a deep tone. So I'm going to show you that in, but I'll erase a little bit of it out later as well, because I want to have those deep bits of tone only for the thickest parts of the body. And yeah, I'm sort of wiping that out a little bit, because that dark tone there is essentially, because the light's traveling through this transparent object, a lot of it's being dropped off, except for the orange that's coming back, and the thicker it is, the longer the light has to travel through it, and the more of it's going to drop off. Right, now just cleaning up a bit of the shade there on the hair, just smoothing it out there, paling it. Adding a bit of sort of hard shadow to the hair, or the hair blob behind the head there. Again, if I mapped it all out to the reference key, it would look fine, but it's also important to not just do that, but also give it some depth by separating the planes out with tone. So it's a bit of a mixed bag with where you're doing the reflective surface and where you're doing the matte surface that is able to catch and hold shadows. Because obviously you can't really sort of cast a shadow over a mirror, because that's not how they work. But with this, I do want to have that depth, so I'm going to do that as well. But you'll notice that with like mirror or sort of chrome finish objects, they don't really have internal shadows. They can't, kind of. But I do want this to have some. That's why, like I talked about before, there's some areas where I'm going to just straight up cheat. I'm going to have things like the face and the parts of the torso be kind of have an opaque sort of skin to them, because I want that ability to communicate tone and to communicate shape. So parts of it I'm going to be inconsistent with, but Rule of Cool says if it makes it look better, it's correct. So hopefully it'll make it look cool. Alright, now going for the thick bit on the arm here. Again, similar to my reference ball there, it's got that thick bit up the top of tone that then grades away as it moves down. So I'm going to get my blender and blend it off so it starts up really thick, and then it grades away and sort of blends down. And it's still kind of a bit too thick, so I'm just going to get rid of some of that, get rid of some of the sides as well, because I don't want it to sort of reach the edges. The edges of the whole thing have to not have sort of any tone that reaches the edge. Again, except the bits that I've cast shadow on, but that's me sort of, playing silly buggers. Get rid of that there. Maybe a little bit on the elbow there, because you can see, again, on the reference shape, there's that grade from the top, and then a little bit of a dark bit down the bottom. And so those are the bits I want to have there. I want to have a really sort of strong bit of tone there on that arm. So I'm going to have a band of thick tone down the bottom, and then a band of grading tone up the top. Since we're working with a sort of blend tool there, it's going to be better if I use the selection to isolate it, and just sort of mask off those bits of the dribbling, gooey sort of hair stuff, so that I don't do any blending on there. But I want to be able to do big, broad strokes of the blending, so I'm going to mask them off, so I don't have to worry about them, or don't have to think about them. Right. So now I've got that, and I can just sort of draw straight through the whole thing. That'll work quite nice. And then, of course, a bit of a blend, and just get rid of some of it there, and make sure it doesn't reach the top edge. I'm also going to leave that sort of space free for when I put the shine on there. Back in there, because I've accidentally erased a bit of that, which shouldn't be gone. That's looking okay. kind of broadly. Realizing I've forgotten to do the thickness of the thumb. The thumb should actually be quite dark, because you can imagine the thumb is actually sort of coming straight towards the viewer. So that means the light would sort of hit the thumb, travel down the length of the thumb to the back of the hand. So it'll be a bit sort of darker. Yeah, that's looking a bit better. Now I'm going to do the drop shadow from the face onto the upper part of the chest there. This is just to sort of pull that bit of depth there. Just because I will lose some of that sort of material property of the slime there, but I'll gain that communication of depth and that differentiation of surface planes, which I really want. But I still want to sort of carve out maybe a little bit there for the collarbones. Again, collarbones are so important for how you shape the face and neck and how you actually build out the upper body. Collarbones are absolutely critical, and I don't hear them sort of spoken of enough. Collarbones are the thing, man. Right. Go. And then keeping that same sort of consistent sort of blob language for the bit coming off the side there. I'm simplifying some of the smaller bits because I don't really need to do all that detail for it. Now I'm just going to mask out this sort of spill section here so I can work with the broader shapes. You should always work sort of big to little. So do the big areas first and then the small areas. So in this case, the chest is one of the, one of the bigger areas. So I'm going to mask out the small sort of detail sections of the hair and blobs, and that'll let me work more on the broader shapes without having to worry about sort of avoiding those little bits. So masking sections out can be really good if you're working on one big single color, which I am. So just like I've got in the reference there, I'll start with my big dark section towards the top of the rounded object, so there'll be like the shoulder there as well, and trying to work from sort of top to bottom and take a broader view because I want to get the broad tone. So I'm going to zoom all the way out here. And start with two big sort of blobs of tone on the top part of the breast there. And then get my blender and sort of smooth those out so they match there. And so long as I have this consistent, like if I had that that key thing, upside down, it would still work. It just looked like she was lit from below. Or if I had, decided that it's lit from behind, then I would make that key differently, and that would then dictate how the slime girl is drawn based on that sort of pattern of the key there. Now, shoulder bit's a bit complicated because there is a bit of like the deltoid and then the bicep underneath it. I'm kind of simplifying that there and giving her a much sort of smoother, softer body there because it's easier to describe. But I'm also, you can see there, cutting in because there's a sort of mass above the breast, which is that bit I mentioned before, which is the pectoral, which has an almost, well, depending on the size of the breast tissue, you'll have a bit of a crease sometimes between the mass of the breast and the mass of the pectoral that sits above it, that it partially covers. So I'm adding a bit more tone there between the two, because that's also like the top of, like the rib cage itself should also have like a very dark section because it's quite thick, but again, that's where I'm taking a bit of creative license there because I want to have the shape of the breasts show up a lot more, so I'm leaning more on the shine than on that shadow that you get from the depth of the object. You can also see that's why the face is pale. The face should be very, very dark, but I haven't actually darkened it very much at all because I want it to contrast with the neck and I want that depth. And I'm hoping that the shine that I do later will tie the whole thing together. So here I'm getting just some of the big easy bits of shade like that. The hair behind there, I'm just going to make all of that very, very dark regardless, because again, there's bits where I'll be mapping off the key, and other bits like that where I just want to separate the objects. And so that's one where I really want to prioritize separating the objects from each other. So finishing up that little bloob there. And then the one underneath the boob on the right. And now, again looking at the key there, I've got that gradient shading on the top section. And I've also got that hard gradient section, that hard edge gradient section on the lowest part of the key. And so I'm doing that same thing there on the masses here. I'm going to try and maybe make that a bit thicker so it keeps up. Because one thing that makes that a bit easy is that these shapes on the body are pretty much big rounded objects, which makes them very easy to map the round object from the key there. Looking good. There I'm just sort of thickening the one on the left there, so it's got a bit more weight. Because I can see, you can even go as far as to sort of, just by eye, but sort of measure it out. So you can see that the bottom shadow there comes up about, about a quarter the height of the overall key there, that key blob. And so I can use that to figure out roughly how high up that blob should go, that shadow should go on the boob on the right there. Looking pretty good. And now I'm going to do a dropped shadow underneath it. Again, this is me wanting to separate objects out more than I want to be accurate to the material. And real thing, I probably don't have to worry about sort of shading off the edge there, because I want that section of the hair behind there to be dark as well. Looking pretty good. Now that I've done that, I can now neaten it up by carving some tone back out by drawing it down along there. Sort of carving that out, and that really does help sort of carve that shape out and make it nice and separate. And of course doing the little dribble as well. Looking good. I'm doing a bit more on that driblet, that bit that's on the top there, and sort of blending that in and cutting it out. I'm trying to be roughly correct to the key there. With complicated shapes like this, your best guess is probably good enough. It's going to be part of a complicated layer of shines and shading anyway, so don't worry too much about it being absolutely correct. Just get it, near enough is good enough. And then the same thing here with the edge of the rounded edge of the hair coming down the right, getting that sort of that hard-edged bottom part of the shine. Probably call it the shine map. I don't know what I want to call it. Just neatening up some bits there. And then working a bit more on that set of sort of blobby shapes on the left there. Now that I've done all the broad shapes for the boobs, I can start working on the smaller stuff. Maybe adding a little bit more tone to these sort of long tendrily bits there, because they're looking a bit plain now. I was just going to try and sort of get away with doing them with just shine, but I can see that they need a bit of TLC. And then some shadows there cast by the eyelashes onto the eyes. And darken in the iris, the pupil, and then around the iris, just to make them look a bit more sort of concave. They're not actually concave, even a real person, but shading the iris as though it's concave can really give a bit more sort of depth to the eyes, so I like to. I think eyes can actually look like that in real life. It's just an optical illusion created by the lens of the eye, but maybe it's not. If I'm wrong, please yell at me in the comments. It's looking pretty good. And now doing a couple little bits of drop shadow from the hair onto the face, just to give it a bit more depth there, because it's looking a bit sort of flat. There's one thing about this character I don't want it to look is flat. A bit more shading around there. That's looking nice. Maybe a bit more neatening up. I don't worry too much about this because it's going to be a fairly complicated sort of bit of lighting to it. But overall it's looking good. And a bit more drop shadow on that hair bit on the right there. That's looking pretty good, pretty solid. Alright. Then got a bit of shine there. Sorry, a bit of shading there on the arm on the right. So going with big, broad ones first. I was going to start with that little blob there, and I realised I should really do the broader shapes first before I sort of come in. So trying to keep roughly to the key image there, but also trying to remember that I want this arm on the right here to overall be darker so that it goes back. So I'm going to shade the whole thing out nice and dark, and then, no, wrong colour, hang on. And then, so a bit more, and just take some out from below. So that's that gradient there. You can see on the key one, so I'm doing a bit of a dark section, and then having it taper down as it goes down. And now to do that blob on the side there, I'm just going to cut the rim out by erasing some of that shade out. And then cut a bit of the rim of the outside of the hair off as well, just to make space for where that shine's going to go. And then I can start on the torso here as well. And you can see here I'm basically shading this as though it was opaque. I'm having the sort of surface that's facing down, I'm having that surface plane be shaded. Hopefully it ties together pretty well with the shine, but I really want to describe that bit with some surface planes there. So I'm going to cheat a little bit there and have the lower part of the torso be sort of opaque in its behavior, at least lighting behavior. But I'm also going to have it quite dark as it gets down towards the pelvis, because that'll be a really thick bit of slime. So that means that the light will have a long distance to travel through, which means it's really going to get darkened and coloured as it goes through that section of the body there. So I'm trying to sort of figure out where I want the edge of that to be. So I'm putting a bit of sort of tone there to kind of feel it out and sort of test it. And I'm not 1000% sure I've sort of landed in the right spot. But I want to sort of allude to that sort of fold there you get over the rib, so maybe a smaller brush would do for getting that shape in. Maybe it won't, who knows. But overall that'll kind of do. And then just building a bit out there. And shading that section of the hips out as well. And essentially sort of shading the whole thing out. Now that I've got that sort of edge on the top there, I don't really need a lot of this to be terribly highly detailed. This is all going to be fairly thick. And also, since this is really far towards the edge of the image, it has to be correct, but I don't want it to have too much detail because that'll pull focus. And I don't want this to pull focus, even though, I mean, it's a nice part of the body, but I don't want it to be the focus of the image. And then a bit of taking a bit of a tone off there and then blending it back just so I can get that slight gradient over and that sort of hard edge to the gradient there, where I'll erase some off and then blend one side of it, so I can have sort of one-sided gradient with a lot more control. And with that, I can start taking some sort of notches out. So for instance, along this bit here, there's that shine I've got to have on the edge of objects. I've got to make sure that's there consistently as well. And also, I want to have it sort of alluding to a fold of skin. There isn't any skin here, but there's a fold of slime, as it were. All right, and overall, that's looking okay. So, I like how that's looking. You can do a big sort of zoomed out check, make sure everything's cool. Yeah, I like the look of that. Alright, now I'm going to grab some of that yellow from the key image, and I'll do some little bits of colour variation. Because remember, the thing about a slime character isn't about how brightly coloured they are with one colour, it's about the variance in colour. So if you think of, like I was talking about with that vanilla syrup I keep thinking of, that I bought at Costco. the thing that makes a lot of these things appealing isn't the color, it's the multiple colors. In this case, it's the grade from that orange to that darker, more cold color in the shading, but then to a brighter, more warm color in the highlights that I'm going to put along the edges here. So I'm putting that around all the sort of shine edges there of the hair. And it'll also have that big white highlight in a second. There's a couple of tricks to that too, but I'll get to that in a tick. But here I'm just adding more of those yellow highlights around the ridges, around the face of the hair there. And I'm also going to start doing some blue as well. So I'm going to have some blue highlights coming from like below and from the right, just to sort of give it a bit more variance so it doesn't look sort of flat. I want a sort of blue section of highlights coming from the right and from below. So I'm going to use the same key to map where they go, but like where they go on the individual objects, but the color of them, I'm going to change that based on where we are on the image. So if we're over on the right side, I'm going to do some more blue, or I'll use the blue to sort of separate things out as well. So here you can see I'm doing it on the edge of the hair on the right, to sort of imply that there's a different light source there. And so I've got, you can see on the brushes there, I've got my two colors. I've got my blue and my orange that I'm switching between. So that can be really handy to just sort of use the X key on your keyboard to just sort of flip between, you know, am I drawing in orange or am I drawing in blue on this layer that's set to screen? And that can really help there. And then a bit of shine on the nose. Alright, that's looking pretty cool. Do a bit of a pale colour on the teeth there. I'm trying to see if I can get away with not having white for the teeth and whites for the eyes. I'm going to end up adding the whites for them anyway, but, you know. I wanted to sort of see if I could have the whole thing just be made out of slime and not sort of cheat by adding little bits of white for teeth and eyes. But now you can see here I'm also using the two different highlight colours to give myself some colour variation in the shine on the eyes. I'm putting a bit down and then just erasing it out so it's not too overpowering, but that's helping give the eyes a bit more sort of focus. So the eyes need to have a lot of, they need to really grab a lot of attention. So they need the highest point of contrast. That can be value contrast. Ideally it should also be like hue contrast, where you've got the two most contrasting colors together. So that's all the colors balled up together. Alright, and with that, I'll just change my brush size there. I'm doing more of the yellow around the sort of fingers and the hand there. And maybe a bit of spot of it on the top of the finger there, just because it's sort of coming towards the viewer. I want that to sort of pop a little bit. And the underside of the hand. You'll also notice that I'm skipping some parts of it, because I'm going to do them with the big white specular highlight, which is very much going to be the sort of star of the show. The shines on this when we get to that stage. But like any show, you can't really have the star of the show without the supporting cast. So all these other elements here, they're what makes the shines make the whole thing look shiny. Without them, they're just white blobs. So these are what makes the shine shine. So if you're wanting to just have, like, where do I put the shines to make it look glossy, that's not the whole thing. The whole thing is, where do I put the rest of the tone and colors to make the shines really pop? A bit more there, and a bit more around the side of that hair on the right there. I'm going to have maybe a bit of blue there. I don't want to have the blue come all the way down. I want to sort of make the blue feel like it's behind as well as to the side there. Basically the blue is anything that's really below or really to the side, or just anything I really want to separate, and I can just I can just fudge where it goes. And so here I'm doing a bit more of the highlights there, and that sort of yellowy orange. And then again on the side of the arm here. Good. And just a bit more on that corner bit of the collarbone and the edge of the pectoral there. And now I'm going to do a bit of blue in that bit under the neck there, because I want that to sort of really feel like its own sort of separate space. So I'm gonna go to the blue light there, just because I really want to sort of separate that out. And then I'm also going to do a little sort of little division bit there. A little sort of crease, little shine bit coming up there. Maybe a bit even coming up the sort of the neck there. Maybe? Yeah, maybe. Looking okay. Moving on. Doing a bit, you can see on that blob on the arm on the right there, I'm doing a bit of a blue side and a sort of yellow side of the shine on the bottom a bit. And then a bit more in there. And I'm also, you can see I've got the lasso tool up now. I'm just lassoing around that area there under the arm. And I'm going to go over like the blue highlight there, just very, very faintly. Mainly just to sort of separate it out from the shade on the bottom bit of the ribcage there. So it's sort of like atmospheric perspective, which shouldn't happen over a distance this small, but I'm gonna. Where you can use a pale sort of blue color to separate things from each other. And I'll do it again here underneath there. So you'll see quite often in your sort of Japanese illustrations that the hair will have a pale blue glow underneath the back of it. It's sort of to simulate atmospheric diffusion. Oh, atmospheric perspective, sorry. And so I'm just going to do a bit of blue there as well. It's coming in under there, because it's quite towards the sort of lower part of the image, so I'm going to use some more blue down there. And same with the arms on the side here. Just make that sort of the blue section where the blue's coming through. That's looking good. And now I'm going to have a bit more of that yellow there, because you can see on the slime key that I've got that sort of that yellow glow coming up from below whenever there's a thick bit. So I want to have a bit of that incorporated here into this part of the rib cage, as though this rib cage is the sort of slime section there. And then maybe a little bit, you can see it sort of comes up from below, it comes up underneath that that lower shine there. And so I'm doing a bit there, just sort of manually dropping that in. And again, this doesn't have to be too neat. It's going to be a fairly complicated sort of field of colours and shines. So I don't have to worry about it being exactly right. Just get it roughly right and we're good. Hopefully. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah, so it's sort of picking up. Alright. There's a large part of it there, so I'm just sort of assessing how it's going, what I like the look of, how it's doing. Alright, so now it's time to move on to the proper highlights, the big white highlights. Big sketcher brush, same one I'm using the entire time. And now I'm going to start adding some of those white edges to things. Big, hard strokes. One thing I want to mention about getting gloss in, if you want a gloss finish, the highlights have to have a very hard edge. If a highlight has a fuzzy edge, then it won't look glassy. If a highlight has a very, very clean, hard edge, that'll make it look glassy. So I want to make sure that when I do these highlights here for the white, I'm giving a really nice hard edge. I'm still not going to use a hard sort of pen tool, just because I don't like the sort of the trailing and I don't know. I don't feel like it sort of fits as well. You might get a good bit of mileage out of it. But the other thing I'm going to do is, you can see there, I'm not just doing big blobs. I'm having them sort of trail off a little bit and be broken up, and that kind of gives the body a bit of texture. Well, not texture, but it gives it more of a sort of complicated smoothness. Like if you imagine the shine over something bumpy, it'll have lots of little highlights. And so I want to have it communicating either that the environment has a broken up solid white light source, or as well, there's like a breakup to the overall sort of texture, like it's sort of squiddly, maybe ridged or maybe bumped or ribbed or whatever it is. And trying to have like big shapes and then just break them off into smaller shapes that sort of taper off and get smaller. And then big shines coming down here, big solid ones, to really sort of make that look like a long sort of spoogly tendril. And then where the surface would be sort of ridging up, I'll add some shine to that. Big round things need it, and also the edges too. Like you can see on the key there, it's out of shot now, but on the actual slime key image, I've got that big layer of white shine. So I'm adding that highlight there to the eyes, and I'm just going to use this as a good opportunity to test to see whether the teeth really need it. But I'll come back to that. And so another big sort of straight line of shine down the side of the hair there, and coming down. And again, trying to keep that really clean, hard edge, and also trying to keep that sort of highlight from along the top there. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. Just use the key to give you an idea of where roughly to place the parts, and then figure out what looks best in the moment. Right, with that, does that look good? And a bit on that sort of dribble there. I've just gone back to the yellow highlight layer, just because there were bits on this sort of dribble bit on the boob on the left there that I didn't quite have the color variance I wanted. I wanted them to go all the way from that sort of orange to the dark color quite close. So I've just gone over that quickly. I'm just adding a bit more shine there to the top and to the arm behind it as well. Sort of seen through there, and then a little bit of a ridge of shine on the left side. I know the key doesn't have one shine on the hard sort of left hand side, but I really want to just like pull that long sort of stream off of the arm behind it. So I'm bending the rules a little bit there just so I can really sort of lift that off. I'm adding a few more sort of complicated little shines in there to show that the surface is bumpier and more complicated, so it gets lots of smaller shines instead of like the one on the top of the head there, which is a huge smooth shape, so it gets a huge smooth shine. And then on the fingers, just doing a couple little bits of shine along the edge there, and the fingers as well, catching a bit of light, and trying to break those shines up where I can. And then on sort of the mass for the thickness of the pad on the palm there, and a bit more on the side of the hand coming down, and a bit along the top of the thumb, because that's a sort of rim shine that it's picking up there. And then on top of the finger as well, and also there. That's looking good. Maybe a bit under the wrist here. It probably couldn't sort of catch the light reliably, but I want a couple of little stripes of highlight there to sort of imply a wrinkle of squish, like a fold of quote-unquote skin there. So I want some little sort of broken up bits of shine there where the hand is bent down. And then I'm going to do a nice big shine below it. Of course, I got that big rim shine on the side there, so I'll just get a big old brush and throw that in there. And just change the brush size a bit. Now do that one along the center there, which is that same sort of big shine from the key. You can see the key in the little image preview on the top right too. So. And then another one on that bump of the elbow there, and those little broken up bits of shine that sort of trail off and on. And again, that sort of white layer of shine that's coming along the top of the arm, and another band of shine along the arm here. Normally I wouldn't do this much sort of shine on a character, even though I think it looks great. This would be very excessive. Like if you had a character that was, you know, be stepping out of a big container of oil, then that would be great, but limited applications. And now there's a really nice big area of shine there on the shoulder. Just really sort of carving that out. I want a lot of contrast, and I want a lot of sort of play with light and shadow here, so I'm going to maybe push it a little bit and try and catch a bit of the top ridge there of the pectoral, where it comes out from the shoulder. I want to sort of catch some of that. That's really lighting up the shadow there. So I've got some really hard white and some really sort of dark shadow together. It'll help sort of pull some contrast. Right, and then a little bit more on the neck there, but I don't want to be too bright, so I'll get the shapes right on that bit of highlight in the neck, and then I'm just going to erase it out slightly, because I want it to have a shine, but I don't really want it to have like a bright shine. I still want it to look glossy, but I don't want it to sort of look like it's fully lit. And then another big, nice blob of white on the darkest areas. You can see in the slime key there that the highlight is basically on the darkest part towards the top. So that's a good way to indicate where I need to add that shine. And the rim shine there on the top line of the boob on the right. And then, of course, that bright white highlight in the middle there. And some more highlights on the actual blob on the top there. And there as well. And then another sort of blob on the top. And now this little ridge of shine here, so if you imagine there's that ridge of shine where the surface comes out, if you had the surface bowing in, all the same layers of shine and shade would be present, but they'd be reversed. But in the middle of it, there would still be a line of shine. So on the inside edge of concave curves, you will have a specular highlight in the same center as you would on the convex, or the bulging out curves. And here I'm adding a bit of shine to the side of the ribs there. This one, yeah, I'm not 100% sure on this one. But I wanted a really big shine there because it's a really big surface. And so I try and sort of break it up a bit by sort of carving a line through it and then sort of neatening up the edges. Mixed success. But again, an image can never be perfect, but an image can be done. And here's a little shine in the navel here. The shine in the navel straight up never makes sense. I will always do it though, because I love how it looks. And then a nice big shine on the side there, like a big sort of rim light coming in, which I like the look of that. And now I'm going to go back to the highlights layer, and I'm thinking I'll add a bit more of that blue, because it's quite sort of far from below, so I might, the orange shine is from above and the left, and the blue shine is from below and to the right, and so this is low enough down, but even though it's not on the right, I'm gonna use the blue here because it'll contrast that shine of orange I've got above it, and that'll give it a bit more sort of color variation to help that bit of shine of orange in the middle of the torso there pop. So I've got the shape right, and then I'm going to go over it again with an eraser just to pale it out a bit. Because it's a bit too strong. I want it there, but I don't want it to be really strong, so I'm just going to pale it with a big eraser. Right, coming back to then the specular highlights. I'm throwing a bit more here, just sort of a layer of shine coming down the hips there. And again, this bit here, where it sort of is close to the meeting of the rib cage and the pelvis, I want to allude to the idea of skin folds, even though there is no skin at all anywhere. That's largely it, and you can see the difference it makes there. And you can see sort of more of it in the picture. Why that shine really needs the colors under it to shine. And you'll quite often get this when you look at sort of gems or crystals, that the shine will be where it bulges out. And also, the crystal will be darkest where it bulges out, because that's where it's thickest. And the more light has to travel through it, the darker it gets. And the more it bulges out, the more likely you are to have a specular highlight there. So you'll get with jewels the brightest shines on the darkest sections, typically. And so now I'm just turning off the key there and getting rid of that, because I don't need it anymore, and realizing I've just forgotten to do one little bloob there. I do apologize for the extra time spent on the bits that I miss. I'm not good at remembering stuff or things. It's a known issue. It's a known issue, which in corporate speak means we know it is a problem, we just don't have a way of fixing it, or we're just not going to. So that's the character largely done then. Now the next just sort of 10-15 minutes I'm going to spend on a couple of little bits of finish. Just a couple little simple elements. So I want to add I'll use the shading layer to add some blush there. There's no reason why slime should blush. They don't have blood vessels that rush towards the cheeks and face, but I'm going to, because I want to. So there's a lot of things that I'll do, not because it makes sense, but because I just sort of I want to. You know, like the pink wolf in the How to Draw Furries video. I think it'd be nice to wear the pink. Wolves aren't pink. They also can't talk and, you know, wear jumpers, so we've left reality sailing far behind. So whatever you decide to do from this point on, you do whatever you want. It's looking pretty good. Now, there's a couple of things I want to have a look at as well. Right. Now, what I'm going to do here is just do a quick little gradient. I want just sort of a brick sort of dungeony wall, because, you know, it's a dungeon monster. Well, I feel like it's a dungeon monster. You know, you see it in dungeons. It's a low rank enemy in your RPGs. I remember saying in another video that I always thought that the big difference with like Eastern RPGs and Western RPGs is Western RPGs have a lot more sort of text-based stuff, and Eastern RPGs have a lot more sort of visual media in their RPGs. And I feel like the fact that in Eastern media the slimes are the lower rank enemies, whereas in Western ones the skeletons are the low rank enemies, really reflect whether or not an illustrator has to draw it. Because if I was the illustrator, I wouldn't want to draw the skeletons until much later, because a skeleton is a really time-consuming thing to draw, whereas a blob of slime, that's pretty straightforward. So here you can see I've just dropped a gradient of one desaturated kind of blue to another paler desaturated kind of blue, and then just over the top of it I'm doing some basic sort of alluding to brick patterns. So there's no actual brick pattern there, but I'm just doing a couple of sections of brick. That's enough sort of shading there. I'll do a little bit on the other side of the head there. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I just want enough there for it to feel like this is, you know, broadly speaking, some brickwork. Now I'll do another layer over the top of the brickwork there. It's just a bit of a shine. Just to put some highlights on the bricks and to make them sort of stand out a bit. And again, I don't want to put too much detail on these because they're just there to sort of, you know, give the impression of dungeon. I think the bricks are a bit small, actually, now that I think about it, but maybe they're far away. And maybe a couple of bits of highlights off on their own. And a bit of highlight on the right-hand side there as well. Alright, next thing I want to do is I'm going to do a bit of extra colour there, just to whiten the eyes. I've been staring at that for a while now, and I've decided that she really does need some white to the eyes. They don't have to be like full white. That one, I don't know, I feel like full white's probably taking it a bit far. It also takes some of the impact away from the shines. So I'm going to do a bit of it there, but I'm also going to take a bit away, like a bit of transparency away, just so it's not too bright white. Like you can see there, that looks like a person dressed as a slime instead of, you know, a person who is a slime. Yeah, it's too white. So once I've got that there, I'm going to lower the opacity to make that show a bit better. But the other thing I want to do as well is I'm going to do a little hue shift on just the irises on the flats layer. Now the reason I want to do this is I want to just give it a little bit of variance. You can see I'm just changing the hue up a little bit, and I'm just warming it slightly. That just puts the eyes in a slightly separate color space. And now I'm going to do, yeah, just a bit of tuning of the shading layer. I just want to change it a little bit, just so it's got a bit more saturation as it goes darker, because I want that color variation. Color variation is key to this working. Like, that's why it's not just all one color. You want multiple colors in there. And now, once I've done that, do a bit more shine there. That's some good. Alright, I'm going to lower the transparency on the whites of the teeth and the eyes. That's shown through, though, that bit of the flats that I've recolored to change the eyes. So I'm just going to make a selection based on the whites of the eyes, and just go over and just quickly fix that up. That's looking better. There we go. Alright, groovy. That's us at the less than 2 hour mark. I'll call it less than 2 hours to draw this. There's still a minute or two of post-processing to go. You can see here I've just expanded a selection based on the character and the ink together, and then I've just filled that with white in a layer behind the flats. That's just to give everything a nice sort of white outline. I didn't feel like it was pulling out from the background quite enough. So I just want to give it that. I mean, if you're in, you shouldn't be in Photoshop, but you can do it with a layer effect of just stroke, which just gives you a bit of an outline around any sort of pixels that are non-transparent in that layer. And now I've merged everything to a new layer. So merge visible to new layer. I've duplicated that. And now I'm getting the top one of those duplicated layers. And I'm blurring it a lot. Because I'm going to use this for effects. I'm essentially going to use the image to do effects on the image. So I've copied it. I've blurred it. And now what I'm doing is I'm doing a levels adjustment. I want to compress everything in. This one can take a bit of adjustment, but what I'm aiming for is to have blown out highlights and really dark shadows. Finding that range in an image like this can be a bit tricky, but there, I've sort of got it there. A bit too dark, but this is essentially a slightly longer involved process than just using a layer with to increase contrast, but this works better just because it does it as a sort of regional thing. And now you can see that blurred one, where I've changed the levels, I've switched it to the overlay blend mode, and I'm just adjusting the opacity until it gets to the right sort of strength. I don't want to have it full strength the whole way because that'd be too much. Now I'm getting a new layer on top, setting it to normal, lowering the opacity just a little bit so I can see through it. And I've got a really warm yellow and a really sort of dark blue. And I'm going to get a big soft airbrush. This is the only time you'll ever use the big soft airbrush, which is for effects. And I'm going to use this to sort of show color hierarchy. So I'll do a lot of big sort of white glow around the focal point. It's going to catch a lot of light. And then I'm going to do a lot of dark in some of the areas that are going to be cooler. This is essentially to make my shadow regions cooler and my highlight regions warmer. It just sort of helps you prioritize and give a hierarchy to your colors. You can essentially treat this like a second sort of shading or sort of highlight layer, where areas that catch the light are going to be warmer and areas that don't catch it are going to be cooler. Obviously, you change this if you've got a cool light, but with this one, I've got a warm light and cool shadows, and so I'm just going to pick up any bits that would catch some light into sort of more of that, and now switch that to an overlay blend mode, and then lower the opacity down, because I don't want the effect to be too pronounced. Alright. And now I'm thinking of doing a gradient map, but I'm not really sure about it. I'm going to give it a red hot go, and see what I reckon. But this one is just to sort of add some different colors at different ones. If you had done the slime in black and white, and you wanted to sort of manually color with gradient maps, then this could be a great way of doing it. You can change sort of what darkness is what color. So you can see there I've got, you know, white to yellow to orange to red, and I can move those sliders up and down to change where that is. So if I move that purple one, you can see it's giving a lot of purple to the shadows there. Now if I change that layer to color and lower the opacity down, it'll give some of that color to what I'm doing, but Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about it. It can be a good way to sort of tie your colors together and give yourself a bit more sort of color cohesion. With that, looking pretty good. Oh, look at that. We're still in under 2 hours. Gorgeous. All right, we'll call that finished. You can, of course, change the color of that too. Like, if you wanted to, you could just do a hue adjustment to your base color, and you could make it into, you know, honey, Mountain Dew, Windex, any kind of thing you want, and you can just change those underlying colors with a hue adjustment. That's one option there. Or you can give it a sort of dual color one. Like, you can have, you know, a layer on top. It's got one color and a layer on, you know, underneath it's got another color. If you wanted to have a mixed sort of, you know, pineapple, watermelon sort of, you know, mix there. That's kind of nice. Or, like me, you had to color it bright green in order to be able to post it on Discord. And we'll see how we go with this one going on YouTube. Maybe YouTube's going to feel the same way. Who knows? But yeah, that's how you would sort of combine the colors together. Alright, now with that, we're finished. We've got our drawing done, we've gone through the sketch, we've colored it, and we've got our final image we've created. Hopefully this has helped you have a sort of method to, you know, put together the characters with this kind of material. I do plan to make some specialized videos on things like metallics, gems, you know, leathers, etc., etc. So this is not meant to sort of supplant that, but this is just another exploration of a very material-based character. And hopefully you enjoyed it. Now, as with all my videos, there is a homework sheet. Well, not a homework sheet. This one, the painting you've been doing as we go, is the homework. So if you're comfortable to share that one, I'd love to see it if you want to pop on over to our Discord, which is linked in the description, for you to share it there. I go through every couple of weeks and give feedback on all the submissions still, so if you'd like to hear what I have to say, pop it in. I'd love to see what you've been drawing. Now, if you like this one, this is actually an image I've done for a review I've made for the new, or newish, XP pen that they've sent me to do a review of. So this is made with a specific tablet. If you want to see a review of the tablet I use to do this, or you're interested in just the tools I use, I'll have a link to that review up on screen now. Or of course, if you're seeing this video when it just goes up, the review may not be live yet, so it might be up in about a week or so. Otherwise, if you like the content and like to see more like it or support the channel, consider pressing like, you know, leaving a comment, telling me what you like in future videos or future speed paints like this, or just questions, or, you know, feed the algorithm. Tell me about your favorite 80s TV show. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. You have a great day. Cheers. Bye.